All right, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the Modern Explorers Guild Workbench. I am Drew, and today we're going to be talking about starting a new army in Warhammer 40k. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that I go through whenever it's time to start a new army, and we're going to talk just a little bit about the previous army that I just finished and go through a few shots of it, talk a little bit about some of the lessons that were learned during that process, and then finish up with some list building and a few other kind of clerical things. Stuff that's not always the most interesting thing, but it's definitely work you would like to do before you get started with buying models or really planning out even the paint job. So let's go ahead and get started with finishing up and talking about our previous project. So this is the final shot from the Cult of Malal. This was the army that started on January 1st, and then we finished up today, really, with just getting everything put together. So it was a really fun process. This is where I worked with putting blue from the left, red from the right, working really with some object source lighting, getting a lot of different types of shadows, warm shadows, cool shadows, and then working with the bases, doing something to unify the army. Before this army, I don't think I realized how important it really was to have something that kind of pulled the army together, not just the paint scheme. That is important, but something like basing can really bring an army together, even if they have disparate models in them. So for example, if you're looking through here, you can see that there is a theme with paint, but the basing, this kind of pastel cathedral floor, no matter what I did with the paint, and there were definitely some fun things that happened that weren't the same across all the models, it still brought them all together, so they still look like a cohesive army. So that lesson was, I think, well learned here during that. And you can see even in these other shots where different types of paints, different techniques were used, they all appear to be from the same army because they do have that base that's unifying them there. Then here we have a final shot here of our battle line guys, and you can see our freehands that we did on stream. So this is 2 months of work. It retailed at about $800, although most of that retail money would have come from Arcanon and Bellicor, which I did buy new from our store, Modern Explorers Guild. The rest of these models were purchased used, either used from the store or used from eBay in a big lot. But we'll talk a little bit more about buying things from eBay in a moment. So let's bring up our display capture. So there we are. We're going to move over here to our web browser. And I'm going to move back and forth, checking the stream chat every now and then to see if you guys have any questions about what I'm doing. But how do I normally start an army? So one of the first things I do when I'm going to start an army is I think about the armies I already have. I think, I have this Imperial army, the Imperium army of Iron Hands. I have a Xenos army in Necrons, and I have kind of a swing army in Chaos Demons. And I want something generally that's going to complement those, something that's going to be a little bit different, but still have the parts of those armies that I like to play. When I do that, I generally start off by coming to Game Workshop's store. So in this case, we're going to be looking at 40k armies. When you go, and I'm sure many of you know this website already, probably a little too well, but I'm just going to go through the process. So I've decided I want a Xenos army. And you can see here on the left-hand side, you do have your Space Marines, and then you have everybody else in the Imperium that's not a Space Marine, Chaos armies, and Xenos armies. So in this case, I tend to recommend that customers have 3 armies. You have your main army, the army that you just love the most. You like the aesthetic, you like the lore, you enjoy painting them. Then you have an army, if the first army is not from the Imperium, I would recommend getting an Imperium army. GW does show some favoritism. They do like to give new models, particularly to Space Marines, but in general to their Imperium armies. So if you're looking for an army that's going to be updated regularly, have new rules, have new models, have some new shiny kits that come out, then one of the armies you would have, and I would recommend, is getting an Imperium army, in particular Space Marines. And then your third army is just the army that you have whenever you're trying to just do something new for the day. Say you've played your main army, you've played your secondary army quite a bit in either open play, Crusade K, or matched play, and now you're looking to do something a little different. Well, here's where we are now. So I'm going to go here to this Eldari army here, because this is the first thing. So let's just take a look through. Here you'll see all of the current products that GW carries. You'll also see their prices, so you'll get an idea about how expensive an army is. Expense is something that I never really took into account when looking at new armies, but customers have really come back to me now over the year and said, hey, I wish I had known how much this army cost. I wish I had known that it was a more expensive army or that it was a cheaper army. And that's now information that I try and make sure customers know whenever we're talking about whatever armies they're interested in. So for example, Eldari here is one of the older armies. It is an army that started way back in the day, possibly as early as 1978 when Warhammer was started. But it's probably one that you could get many used models on eBay. And so it's something that shouldn't be that expensive. The newer models, of course, are, but the used model market is a place where you will be able to find many of these models in various conditions. Again, something we'll talk about a little bit later. Looking through these armies, we're looking mostly at the aesthetic. At this point, we don't care anything about how it plays. We don't care anything about the meta. You should never be chasing the meta in Warhammer, because Games Workshop is the sole arbiter of what is good in Warhammer, and they've come out with their plan that tells you that they would like all of their armies to be between 45 and 55% win rate. That's hard to do, but anytime an army gets too high above it or falls too low, they tend to make changes. They don't always get it right, but in recent years, they are pretty good about making those changes. So chasing the meta is a bad idea, mostly because of how quickly things change over. Games Workshop tends to do something quarterly, but every 6 months for sure, they will alter the meta in some major way based on the national and international tournament rankings that they have for armies with Frontline Gaming and for their own thing. So the big guys, the big independent companies, and the stores that they have out there that belong to them, they do have tournaments through them as well. So I'm still just looking through here, and I'm really just trying to decide whether or not I really like the way these look. And some of these models are like these striking scorpions and swooping hawks. They're still in resin. So if resin is something that bothers you, when you see these web-only ones, and they're pretty cheap, oftentimes this lets you know that they probably are a resin model. Which this one is not, but I know for sure that the striking scorpions are. Now, if you were happy with this, then you could stop here. But if you're not, come back, remove what you saw there, go back to Xenos, and then try taking a look through Drukhari. Maybe if the craft worlds were not to your liking, then maybe the kind of evil sadistic elves would be. So you can take a look through here and decide, hey, I really like the way these guys look, or I don't, and then move on. Again, at this point in searching for an army, we're really just interested in what they look like. But in my case, I went through all of these Xenos armies here. I just took my time, went through. I really like the way that Genestealer cults look. I think they are a super cool looking army. They're very difficult to play though. So when I got to later stages of looking through how they play, I decided, you know, I need an army that is not so difficult for me to get a handle on, because I do need to go through these fairly quickly for not just streaming purposes, but for knowing them in the store. Necrons is my main army. I have almost 11,000 points of painted Necrons, almost every model that's ever been made for them. that was mainstream here, with some exceptions for Forge World stuff. Orcs, I love the way they look. I like their lore. They just didn't work out for me for their rules. I have played them before, and it just didn't fit my play style. Tau, I decided same thing. They're kind of got this robot thing. I liked it. And I can just keep going down and telling you kind of, what my thoughts were, but you'll make that decision ultimately. So, starting here at the Games Workshop web store, I went through and I found the Eldari. And I said, they're a classic army. I have seen them played for many, many years. And they have some new cool models, like the Avatar of Cain here. There's also a classic version of this if you want, but this is a large model, one that gives you plenty of opportunities for artistic expression, something that I look for in the models. Whenever you're painting a 25, 28, 32, 40 even millimeter model, it's difficult to use so many techniques that you might want to use because the model is so small and you just don't have the surface area that you need to really make a compelling volumetric highlight or to do some really fancy non-metallic metals. Sometimes you're really looking to have a centerpiece model for your army, and not every army has a good centerpiece. So again, look at the aesthetics of that. Look at the larger models. You'll be able to tell because they're generally more expensive. See if that aesthetic here would really fit something that you want to do. And this Avatar of Cain, yeah, it looks really cool. I like the jet bikes. It's something different than what I've done. So at this point, I've kind of decided, yeah, let's go ahead and start working on this. So from there, I tend to go to Wahapedia. For those of you that don't know what Wahapedia is, it is a rules encyclopedia that is hosted in Russia. That is currently controversial, I do understand that. But for many, many years before the invasion, this was the place to go for your information. GW has many times tried to shut them down. And again, I understand they have to follow they have to keep a hold onto their IP or else they have the chance of losing it in court. But this is an extremely useful website. So if I wanted to know about the Guardians, so this is just the general troops for the Eldari army. I can come in here and get all of the information I need. So I've taken a look to see kind of what the aesthetic is and that I'm down with the aesthetic. Now I'd like to know a little bit about how the army works and what I'm looking at when I look at kind of a basic troop. So I come in here and I see, okay, well, I get 10 to 20 of them, so maybe they're a little bit hoardy. They have a weapons platform, so whatever that is, apparently they get that. And now I'm going to look at their movement. So are they a fast army or a slow army? How is this army going to kind of be moving across the battlefield? Movement in Warhammer 40k is extremely important. Mastering movement is one of the keys to winning tournaments and doing well. So the base movement for your models is something that's important to know and understand. From there, we start looking at weapon skill, ballistic skill. How well do they shoot? How well do they fight? Is this an army that really is geared towards trying to kill everything? Or is it an army that's geared towards defense? Or does it kind of do both okay? Looking at their strength and toughness, then I go, okay, well, this is a fairly weak army. These guys are not very strong. In fact, they're not even as strong as Space Marines in most cases. But their strength and toughness is 3 and 3. They're kind of on the same strength and toughness continuum as Necron Scarabs. So they have bug strength, which is not super great. 1 wound apiece. And so, okay, maybe we do want quite a lot of these guys. And they get 1 attack. All right. Leadership 7, not great. Leadership is something now I'm looking at this. They'll probably come into play, especially if these guys are kind of a hoardy army. And they have a 4-up save. So half the time they're going to take it. That's not great. The other thing to look at is the base size. GW has changed the base size many, many times. Wahapedia tends to update very frequently. And base size is not something that GW includes in their documentation outside of their build documents. So when you buy a box of models, it'll come with the bases that you get for it. And that's great. You can look at those. You can even measure them if you want to. There's lots of little measuring tools out there. But whenever you're trying to decide, is this going to have a non-standard base? The answer for Eldari is actually yes. It has a 28 millimeter base, and that's a unique GW size. It is 0.75 inch. It's directly in between 25 millimeter and 32 millimeter. There was probably really no reason for them to do this, in my opinion. But they did create a proprietary sized base that's actually 28.5 millimeter, and that makes it exactly 3/4 inch. The only way to get these is through Forge World. And if you have even a store like mine, I'm unable to get a discount from Forge World, so you'll be buying these at full cost from them. So one more thing to consider whenever you're looking at your armies. But here they're going to tell you what their points cost is a piece. They're going to be telling you what their power is and what their battle line is. They are troops. And then you can check out their weapons and kind of get an idea about what's going on with that. Many armies have some kind of shtick that you should be looking at and go, okay, this is shuriken weapons. Okay, cool. What's that? And so this lets you know that they have an AP modifier kind of shtick going on, which could be fun. Their weapons seem to be mostly fairly strong weapons. And so this is kind of telling me that this army moves pretty fast. They are able to hit things half the time, a little more than half the time. And they're not very strong or very tough, kind of on their own. So you're going to be focusing on maneuverability. So maybe not so hoardy, because then you'll get caught a lot of times with your big blobs of guys. And then you can check out their keywords. Keywords are also important. See if anybody has fly, see if they have hover, see if they have anything particularly interesting going on. Who has core? Core has now become really important. So just checking through all of your different models here. And this gives you an idea about what you're going to be seeing just in your basic troops. And then you can move around in the heavies and other things. And you can just go to the website here, check out the different models, and then look at their rules here. And so this is a way to get a preview of what these models can do before you buy into the codex. And I do, despite the cost, recommend buying a codex. I like holding something physical in my hand, and it's nice to be able to go to the Warhammer app and use that. But as we'll talk about in a moment, there are alternatives that you can use to check out your army. So now that I've kind of decided that Eldari, the theme looks really good to me, I like that there's a centerpiece model with lots of real estate for me to be able to be creative, for me to be able to do some fun stuff on a little bit later. I've gone to Wahapedia, I've checked out some of their models just to make sure that the playstyle will kind of work for me. Check out some of their HQs, see what their special abilities are, check out their psychic powers. Psychic powers are still something that really can affect the game. So you want to see if those are the kind of play styles that you're interested in. And then I start looking around to see, what do I want to do with this? So I like what GW has done. You can see that there's definitely some kind of sect or some kind of, what would these be? Like the Space Marine chapters, but there's clearly some kind of chapters going on here. Well, what are other people doing? Let's get some inspiration here. So let's check out Eldari, and this is just Googling Eldari on Google and switching to images. Here we do have safe search turned on because I am in a stream, so I don't want to get flagged here. But just going through, you can start to check out what people have done, and you can add other keywords here too. So Eldari art, you can say painted armies. You can go through and do that. After looking through a few things here, I saw several people had done something that looked like these galaxy prints. And so this is all probably about an hour into looking through the army, just while listening to a podcast. And so I came through and I kept looking and I came across this video here. And so this is going to come back in just a moment, but I saw that someone had done this galactic pattern here. And this was really cool. I really liked the look of this. And I thought, that is what I would like my Eldari to look like. How can I do that? So I needed something. Now I kind of knew what I was going for. I figured out that I wanted Eldari. I understood how they played, at least a little bit, enough to be okay with it. I looked through to get some basic ideas about how I'd like to paint it. And then I drilled down just a little bit. And so I knew the paint scheme that I was going to go for, and I knew what models it would mostly look good on. So now I start my search for models, not at my local game store, and I do realize I sell these models, but the first place I usually recommend people look is eBay. If, and this is a big if, you're willing to do some work. Whenever you buy models on eBay, you will get a deal almost always, unless you're doing it wrong. But these models were put together by someone else with different standards, someone who might have run out of time, someone who might not actually know how to paint or how to put together models. And so the quality of the build and the amount of paint you will find on these models will vary greatly. So make sure that whatever you're getting into, you're okay to do that legwork. And we'll talk a little bit about how we go about working with these models that we get off of eBay and the process for going through it. There's a really good YouTube channel called eBay Miniature Rescue. And it is a channel that shows you the whole process over and over again. So if you were curious about what you would need to do to take the paint off, what you need to do to kind of clean things up, take models apart, that's a really good channel to get kind of a baseline idea. But you simply put Eldari Army in. Some of the things I like to do when looking on eBay is actually to come over and change some of my settings. So I generally do not want to wait on a model to get to me from the UK. And because Games Workshop is in Nottingham and their models were first made there and continue to be there in great numbers, a lot of it is going to be coming from the UK. So I like to set it to North America only, and I still leave it on all listings, and I try to decide kind of how much money I'm willing to spend. There's no reason to really look at armies that are $1,000 when I know I'm only going to be willing to spend up to maybe $300 on this. You're not going to really find armies for less than $100 unless you're just looking for bids. So I'm going to instead set it here from 100 to 300 bucks. And I'm going to kind of go through and see what we have going on. So right off the bat, we have things that were partially built, but then partially on sprues. And so this looks like a bad deal to me, since this appears to just be the combat patrol, but they want $250 for it. Here's a bunch of vehicles. This one actually, since I'm going to be doing something like the galactic stuff, that seems like a good idea. These all look like things I could use. Some of these look like they might be Drakari, but again, I don't know the army that well, so this might bear some looking at. Here we can see we've got kind of a mix of vehicles and troops. So maybe this one is something that would interest me. And now I start the process of looking through and trying to decide before I even bother with pricing or anything else. No matter the price, are these in a condition I'm willing to work with? Looking at these models, is this in a condition that I feel like I can do something with and just won't be miserable with? So take a really good look at the pictures. And if you need more pictures, ask them. So try and find these closer up pictures. So just looking at this wave serpent here, I'm looking at this and it looks like it has a twin shuriken cannon on it. It was one of the vehicles that could have been a fire prism. And it's got a few other upgrades. You can see those things coming off the side. But what I'm really looking at here is the paint job. It looks like I can see the white primer, and I know it's white because you can see the heads and pieces of the bikers as well as the driver of the Wave Serpent. So I know they undercoated this model with white. But that red has white showing through. That lets me know that this is a pretty thin paint job. It would probably be relatively easy to get this paint off. Something I'm willing to do. And then this other guy back here, this is a Wraith Knight. He looks like he doesn't have any paint on him at all, which is great. I would much rather get paint models that are put together, but are not painted, because I am going to end up stripping them, almost no matter what. I also look at these models to see if I can see any mold lines that are really obvious, or if there's any bits of sprue. Sometimes people just kind of break the bits off of the sprue, and as terrible as that is, they do it. And it ends up on eBay here when they decide, it just wasn't for them, which again is okay. Different life experiences and different things come up for people. And sometimes you just don't have time for a hobby, even if you really enjoy it. But I'm still looking through all of the bits here. That's somewhat concerning here. It looks like they tried to pull the head off and it broke. So that's not glue, that's actually the discolored plastic where it was taken off. So now that I've seen a little bit of damage here, I'm just going to look extra careful at the rest of this army. And they have a little bits cup. So overall, this isn't terrible. This is actually pretty good. So you can see these walkers and guys. Now, if you don't have a good idea about what models cost, if you're not really aware of the value of models, then what I would recommend you do is take a look at their description here. And oftentimes in the description, they will actually tell you exactly what is here. And they'll also tend to tell you how much it was if you bought it new. But we're not really worried about that number. This is them trying to sell you it. And I'm not saying these people, or this guy in particular, is being dishonest. But it is up to you, the person buying the army, to really do this research here. So check it out. See if the value you get here, just by going to GW's website, and oftentimes I would at least take 10% off of GW's website, because wherever you buy these models at, they are almost certainly going to be giving you a discount. Usually it's 10%. GW kind of assumes that its third-party retailers will be doing that. But, sometimes it's a little more. 15% for GW is MAP. So if you find a model that's more than 15% off and they're advertising it, they're technically breaking the rules with GW. But for the most part, you'll find things 10% off. So go through, figure it out. Is this worth it? They're asking $159. This is a bid here. You could also make an offer. If it really is $400 and you wanted to buy this army, you would say, if you really wanted it, go, okay, well, here's my shipping. Don't forget about shipping, because shipping can get you sometimes. But okay, $822 seems fair for shipping. That's very cheap, in fact, at least in 2023. And so here you come, you say, okay, 160, maybe I'll offer 200. And if it truly was, if my math came back and it matched their math pretty closely, I would say, okay, it's about $500 brand new. I'll offer 200 and see what they say. Maybe they'll counter offer 250. Have a number in your mind before you do this, though. Say, okay, the maximum value that this army is worth to me, given the amount of work I will have to do to get it into shape, because that's important to remember that this army is not ready to go, and it's not new on sprue. You will have to clean it. Given what your time is worth, what is my maximum value? Don't put a value in here until you know what your maximum is. Because until you know that number, you don't know anything. You have to know what you're willing to go to. For me as a store, it's a little bit different. Oftentimes, I need to, when I'm getting something like this, and I'm buying something on eBay, I need to make sure I have between a 40 and, or I should say a 50 and 60% margin on these items. And that sounds like a lot until you realize, hey, I'm going to have to spend some time on this, even as a store owner, to make sure things are good. Hey, I'm going to have to put things on sale sometimes. And so, okay, I start with a 50% margin. I'm going to give you 10% off for being part of Crusade. So now I'm at a 40% margin. And then let's say we have another sale in the store. I say just, 15% off blanket. So now I'm down to 25% margin. And is it worth it for me to have put this much money into this product over that period of time? Now, for most people, that's not something you have to consider. Your main consideration is going to be how much your time is worth. And so if you want to spend all the time in the world working on these guys and you want to spend the time putting them together, taking them apart, stripping down their paint, the cheaper the better in that case. There's almost no limit to how low you can go. But if you do need to spend some time wisely and just don't have a lot of it to spare, you'll probably want to look for armies that are a little bit closer to being table ready. So I've looked at GW's website. I've gone through on Wahapedia. I've taken a look at their models. I say, okay, I'm good with that. I've been inspired. I know kind of roughly what my paint job should be. I've looked on eBay to find models on which that paint job would look good and are in a condition which I am willing to work with. Now, I'm going to continue looking around and refining what I want for the paint job. And I could have done this step earlier too. I could have gone onto Pinterest and then typed in Eldari or 40K miniatures and looked through and found some of the really cool people that are out there doing really great work. There's just some amazing artists out there. Checking out their freehands. It's really at this point about getting inspired. Just look at the colors on this guy. Just incredible art here. It really pops off. It reads really, really well. And this is the kind of thing to get inspired by. It's the kind of thing to look through and not lament that you can't do it, but then look at it and say, you know, this is something I want to aspire to. I'd like to do this. Once you go through and kind of get that, you can also go to DeviantArt. There's quite a few places, Pinterest, DeviantArt. I would say start looking on YouTube. Look for the techniques being shown to you. The collective knowledge of mankind is thrown on YouTube somewhere. If you would like to pick up a skill or you'd like to learn how to do something, man, that is the place to go. You will definitely be able to find someone doing some variation of it on YouTube. In this case, the picture that I saw was actually belonging to Phoenix Designs, Iowa. So there was someone who actually already put this together for me. And I did watch this video, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And I spent about 2 to 3 hours looking at everyone's techniques, trying to see what people were generally doing, what tools did they use, from sponges to airbrushes to little pieces of torn cardboard to stencils. All of these different things to fire, apparently, on this one. This is one I didn't watch. So I wanted to see how people pulled it off. And I wanted to see if I could find people that I'm already familiar with, like Angel here. So these are people I've already seen before, Travarian, like Sergio. These are all people I'm familiar with. And if I can find those people I'm familiar with that are also showing me how to do this technique, all the better. But it's also an opportunity to find new people and be inspired with whatever it is they can do. It's always great to have as many teachers as you can get. And it's not that you should really take their technique and say it's the one all be all. It's one more data point for you to add to. And when you get stuck in some situation where you're trying to paint something but don't quite remember or don't quite know how to, you can go back to whatever technique it was you picked up off of one of your teachers and apply it there. Something that each individual might not have been able to give you, but on the whole, you were able to put together a technique and make it yours. So YouTube is really, really good for that. And don't just watch one video. Watch a bunch of videos. Figure out which one gives you the result that you want the most, or uses the tools and uses the paints that you have access to, and then go through that process to find it. It's worth your time. And I realize none of the stuff I've said yet is actually building or painting or playing. This is all work ahead of time, a priori. So that when you do get down to building and painting and stripping and making everything nice, you're not just wasting your time on something that you ultimately don't really want. If you've gone through this process, then there's a very good chance that this is going to be the army and the paint job and the models that you really want to be fielding. So when you go to build your list, you've gone through this process that we've talked about before, starting at GW's website, getting inspired, looking at rules, finding the models on eBay, and now you've got those models in mind, or you've purchased them, and you'd like to start putting together a list. And this is mostly to see what else you might need to get to either the points value, if you're playing matched or open play, or the power value, if you're playing narrative. Now, narrative is what we play in our store at Modern Explorers Guild every Wednesday at 5:30. And we're most interested in power. So 25 and 50 power games are the thing of the day. This on Warhammer Community's website, you can see they do have the app, and it is part of the Warhammer Plus subscription. This will give you access to the Age of Sigmar app and the Warhammer 40K app. It is not cheap. So for $5.99 a month, they will give you access to this information. Now, you'll also get access to a lot of other things, and this might not be worth it to you. I'm not trying to sell you this. I get no benefit for it. But I will tell you that it has been useful for me, and in this way. Their app is not always correct, and they are slow to update it. But they show this information in such a way that it is easier for me to look at during games than is Battlescribe. In some cases, it really depends on the army. Having access to it is nice, though. It also gives you something to do with the code that's in the back of your codex. So when you do purchase that codex, or if you do purchase the codex from GW, which I understand is controversial and they are expensive, I completely acknowledge that. These cost too much for what they are. But if you have decided that you have a collection or that you just want to hold something physical, there's a code in the back of these, and that code slots into these, which will allow you to have all of the information for the army available to you, which will include a picture, their stat line here, and then their available weapons, loadouts, battle gear, all that kind of stuff. And so this is helpful for building your list and being about 90% sure that it's correct. Wahapedia probably updates quicker than that, and something like Battlescribe updates even more frequently, but not because the person who made Battlescribe does it. There is a large community of very passionate people behind Battlescribe that are always updating the app's information. And it can be a bit arcane and esoteric. To get Battlescribe to work correctly, you will need to follow a few tutorials online to change the data source. Otherwise, it tends to lock up, or it tends to spin for a really long time, or things have to time out, and it's just not a great situation right now. This is mostly due to the fact that the Battlescribe author, the person who wrote the app, is absent. They don't really respond to anything, and they haven't been around for quite a long time. They are somewhat controversial in their own right, but that's not something that I'm really here to talk about today. Just to let you know that it does exist, and that the community behind it is the ones responsible for updating the data. Which brings me to Rosterizer. Rosterizer is a list building tool that was created by the same community that is providing the data for Battlescribe, but because the person who did Battlescribe is absent, they are now working on their own app. It is currently in public beta. It is very rough. And when I say very rough, I mean very rough. It's very rough. It is barely functional right now, but it is definitely getting there. The first time I heard about this was 3 or 4 years ago, and it was just a whisper back then. But now there is actually a thing going on. So you can check out they have a video on YouTube. They put it out quite a bit before the public beta even started, so that was a little strange. But here you'll be able to make your army, get the information for it, and it has a similar information to what you'll find on Battlescribe, but a little bit different form factor to you. So Rosterizer is something that's up and coming. It is not ready for the limelight yet. Now, one more thing to consider actually. So let's go back just a little bit to our eBay looking. It's something I forgot. I should have stuck this right there. Oftentimes when you're looking at these armies on eBay, they will kind of, as a throwaway line at the end, mention, oh yeah, also it comes with a carrying case, or it comes with foam, or it comes with some customized box. That is really important to consider. And I'm going to show you the Eldari army here that I purchased, but it happened to come with this box. And they did not price this box into the value of the eBay bid. They just said, hey, it just comes with it. Now, whether that's because people don't really think through it, or it's because maybe the pack was a gift from someone and they just really didn't think all that much, it's worth it oftentimes to add the word foam to your search to see if someone actually has included something like this with it. And oftentimes it's simply not priced in. So you'll be buying the models and getting a free pack for them, which of course you could use for another army if you wanted to. So that is roughly the process that I go through whenever I am looking for an army, starting the process of, hey, I want to do an army. What army should I do? Here's some rules about that army. Let's get inspired and see kind of what other people are doing. Let's be more specific about it and find something that I really want to do. Go look for models that are in a condition I'm willing to work for, and models that the paint scheme will work on that I have now decided on. Add foam to your search to see if someone has included this bag, and then you can do your own math and figure out if it's priced in or not, or you're about to get a free bag. Go to Pinterest, refine it a little bit more. Go to DeviantArt, refine it further. Or if you're already happy with what you're doing, come and think about what a list might look like, either before or after you buy some models that fit the aesthetic and the paint scheme that you would like, and then see what else you would need to get. To be a Battleforged army in Warhammer 40k under 9th edition rules, you will need at the very minimum an HQ and troops. So having an HQ and troops is something you should be kind of looking for in here, but this will give you some more information about maybe what you're missing, and you'll get to see the points value. Battlescribe is actually quite a bit better for power, whereas the Warhammer app does points just fine. So now that we've talked about the kind of process that I go through on the web, let's take a look at the models I do have. And this will be the beginning of the series on this Eldari army, which I have. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back over. So here we are on our table. So I did actually get that box that I showed you. I'm not going to pull it up for the camera, but it is a Battle Foam Pack 352, and it came with quite a bit of stuff. So what I've already done is I have taken the models that were in there. I paid about $200 for the Battle Foam, the box, and all of the models that you see in here. I've already gone through these models, removed all of their bases, mostly because their bases are incorrectly sized. They were on the 25 mil bases, which are no longer accurate for these guys. And what I'm going to do is change my properties here really quick on my camera. Get this guy focused up. There we go. That's better. And so these are the old sculpts. And you can see here from all these little stripes all over them that they had crazy mold lines. And the paint is just a little too thick. I did contact this person and ask them about what they had done, and they put many, many layers of washes on them, which I had kind of figured after looking at these highlights here and these dark areas. These models are actually so old, this is Macragge Glaze. It is a paint they don't even make anymore. Something else maybe to think about while you're going. But I took every one of these, and I took them apart where I could. I removed all of the sprue marks, which there were quite a few on here. So I went through with my razor blade, cleaned that all up. This process probably took about an hour and a half. There's a few pieces that were broken, and I did find them down in the foam. Any place that I could really take a model apart, I did. That way, when I put them into the solvent to remove the paint, which I'll talk about in a moment, I can get to all the pieces. And so same thing here. There's some repair work that I ended up doing on this one. And these weren't painted poorly. They're just not painted the way I want them to be painted. So they're going to all get stripped. And this is the box of pieces. So those are the ones that look like that. I was also able to rummage around in some previous boxes that I had received and found some striking scorpions here. These are the resin guys. I found some extra bikes here. I found some of their elites here. All of these were just eBay lots from back in the day that I had purchased for something else that either a customer wanted or that I wanted, and I just had extras. So I ended up going through and finding these in the bits box. I cleaned them up as well using my razor blade, removing all of the little sprue bits, anything that was on here that shouldn't be. And so these are now all nice and clean. I have the bases here as well. They'll actually end up getting cleaned. And seeing how well the bases really brought an army together, really unified a theme, I decided that I was going to do the same here. And ultimately, I decided to get some stencils. That box also came with this, which is the Start Collecting Eldar. Of course, GW changed the name to Eldari. That way, they were able to get a little bit more. They can save that IP a little better in court if they needed to. So this is an old box, but it's full of sprues. It's full of bits and pieces, which is great. So I will be able to put those guys together and get them going. I went to the game store down the street that was not our game store, that's been carrying Warhammer for quite a bit longer than we have, and I found this old box of Guardians. So they match the other Guardians that I have, so I'll make one of them as a, let's see, what were they even called? They were Guardian Defenders and Storm Guardians. Those were the two that I was going to do. And so I'll do that there. And now I have ones that match, and I can take some of the newer guys from this box. So this is the brand new combat box. I got this from our store, Modern Explorers Guild. And they have some extra bikes in there. They have another grouping of these Guardians, but they're the newer ones. And so they don't quite match, but I'm going to be using bits and pieces of them because they have the additional weapons. I do have the oldest ones, and originally the Storm Guardians were part of a upgrade kit that was only available in resin. So get to work with a little bit of resin. I spent probably another hour and a half cleaning up all the resin, all the flash. This kit even comes with a Wraith Knight here, so that'll give us a little bit of tanking and melee for the army. But with all these pieces here, how am I going to be going through and removing the paint? Well, there is a product called Simple Green. Simple Green is what I'm going to use on all of these guys. These acrylic water-based paints can be removed in many different ways, but if you use a solvent that's petroleum-based, like fingernail polish remover or gasoline or turpentine or, anything in that nature, you will end up melting the models. And that's just what's going to happen. These are all polymers, and those solvents turn them into monomers. And so they'll melt, and you'll be sad. So you don't want to put those hydrocarbon-based solvents on these guys. What I like to use is Simple Green, and Simple Green's main ingredient is citric acid. There are a few more things in it. There's a flow aid and some other stuff, but basically it is an industrial degreaser. And I bought from Harbor Freight a little ultrasonic cleaner that has a heat function too. You do not want to apply heat to these resin guys because they will start to droop and have other bad things happen to them. Even though you can see this one already has some bad things happening with his kind of weird curvy gun. But that can be fixed a little bit later once I remove the paint. And for that, we'll just put him under hot tap water, have a bowl of ice water handy, and stick him under the tap, bend this to the correct position, just slightly over, and then dunk it into the ice water, and it'll hold its position. This works the same way with Forge World resin, if you have that, or if you've ever purchased resin models from other companies that are PVC based, or that are kind of soft, that will move, like these guys, you should be able to do the same thing without breaking them. These guys will spend an entire day in the bath. They will go into the ultrasonic cleaner at the beginning of the day with the Simple Green in it, and I usually use a 1-to-1 water to Simple Green. You can also get LA's Totally Awesome at the dollar store. It is also an industrial degreaser. I have found that LA's Totally Awesome really needs to be used straight. My guess is that it has a little bit lower molarity. My brain would not say that word for just a brief moment. And so it really needs to not be watered down with water. It just needs to go in straight. It does cost quite a bit less, but in my experience, it normally takes an extra day or so to really get the paint off. In addition to this, I purchased an ultrasonic toothbrush from Amazon for $10. And that's what I use to really get all the paint off very easily. After this is sat in the vat for a day, when I come back to it, this paint with the ultrasonic toothbrush really just sloughs off as you touch it. And if it doesn't, you just put it back in. You don't fight with it. You just stick it back in there for another few hours and see how it goes. If it needs, you can apply the heat to it, although you might not necessarily want to start there. But you could. Ultrasonic cleaners, especially the one, many of them, in fact, have a heat function where you can turn that on so it heats it while it's working. But again, for resin models, if you do that, you'll find that they might start drooping. And so you could get have a bad experience with that. So these are the models that'll need that process done to them, including this, which is the little glass panels. So these are all going to get cleaned. They'll get cleaned up and they'll sit overnight in that. You can actually see with this guy's legs that he might have actually been part of an army at a different time. He looks like he has some magenta paint on him with white knee pads, and that's not how any of the rest of these were painted. So this might be even the third life that these minis have had. So we've talked about the process that I go through from the very beginning and now to the very start of how I would paint it. You've seen me paint armies now from start to finish with the Cult of Malal, and you've seen me paint mini minis from start to finish like the Primaris guys that we worked on while we were taking a break from build to paint. And now we're going to do that process again, but with the Eldari. So I know this is going to be a little bit of a shorter stream today, but I wanted to share with you the process that I go through, the things that I look at and that I look for whenever I'm building an army and whenever I'm putting it together from the very beginning. I wanted to share with you also the finished product of the Cult of Malal, something that I had a lot of fun doing and that I was very proud of. I felt I learned quite a bit on that project, and it was fun to bring that into the store and get feedback from a lot of the people that I really appreciate hearing feedback from that are in the chat, that are in the Facebook group. All of that was really great. So if you have any questions, now is a great time to ask them. Let's see. Yep, we got a few people in the chat here. So if anybody has any questions about starting an army, or they have any questions about maybe how to Google things, I know that that sounds a little bit trite, but what I discovered is that customers oftentimes don't kind of have a strong Google foo game. So when they're looking for something on Google, they oftentimes kind of fail to find the keywords that would make their lives a little bit easier. So getting good at Googling things is definitely a place you would like to be. Just looking through chat here. All right. So what am I going to do in between streams here? Well, first of all, I'm going to put all of those painted models into the vat with some fresh simple green mixed 1-to-1 with water. They're going to sit overnight, and then I'm going to clean them out. It is below freezing at night, above freezing during the day. And that is something to consider. The colder that is, you don't always need to turn on heat, but the colder it is, kind of the longer that stuff takes to work. I found that adding a little bit of heat, especially when it's cold outside, definitely gets the process going faster. So I'm going to strip all those models down. I am going to put them with the correct bases, but not on the correct bases necessarily, because those bases will be finished independent of the models. I normally do this, and then I put the models on them. That way I can have all of my bases be very consistent and have a coherent theme across all of them. What type of simple green? And what model agitator do you use? Sure, I'll tell you what, I will run over here. Let's switch it over here and I'll go and show you what I get. So let's do this. Where I'm at here in Michigan in the United States, I go to Home Depot to get this. I've also seen it in other places here, but Simple green is actually purple. Here it is. Simple green heavy duty pro HD. This is the stuff I have always used. It says it makes 14 gallons. It won't if you're using it for this process. But this is what I have always used. I did see that there's some other simple greens out there, and you could give those a try. But this concentrated simple green here really has worked well, and I've been using it now for years. And I have gone back and forth with the LA's Totally Awesome that is at the dollar store. But when it comes down to it, if I really need something clean, this is what I end up using right here. And what was the other part of your question? What type of simple green for paint stripping, and what model agitator do you use? So the ultrasonic that I ended up doing is... Did you mean to spell it correctly? I did, but I failed. Oh my. Blasting me with all the ads here. This is exactly the one I have. Century Machinery's 2.5 liter ultrasonic cleaner. It is $90 here. It does not come with either this gun barrel or any of these other pieces that you see here. But this is what I end up using. There is a plastic tray in here. This one actually has an on and off function, a set function, which lets you change the time that it runs for. And this TC is heat. So you can turn this on for heat. Its setting goes up to a maximum of 5 minutes, but I found that if you set it, run it, and then nest those settings, it'll actually run for a lot longer. This little plastic thing that's in here, this is my one complaint. The plastic thing that's in here, eventually the heating element runs in a snake under it right here. It'll eventually burn. So if you look at it, it appears to have an elongated cigarette burn almost across it. That is somewhat sketchy, but it did take it almost a year and a half to get that. So this is the little agitator I use. So ultimately what you're going to be looking at is what? $15.58. You'll just go pick this up in the store, and about $90, and you can get those 10% off coupons that they have. For Harbor Freight if you sign up for literally anything, but just keep in mind they'll spam you for the rest of your life. You'll be able to get this for about $10 off, $9 off of it. So you're looking at just around $100. We'll get you a setup to clean all of these models. I don't think this is worth it if you're going to do it once. So I don't think it's worth it if you're going to buy one army off of eBay, make it your lifelong army, and never do it again. Yes, you could use this to clean other parts, but I think if you were doing this for something else, if you were really into, say, either watch cleaning, watch redoing, that kind of thing, or you were into doing kind of small engine repair or that kind of thing, you would probably have a little bit more industrial setup anyways. Whereas this one is kind of a stopgap, I think, between truly just sticking something in a jar and shaking it and getting the industrial sized ones. This is kind of the thing in the middle. Relatively easy to clean in between projects. Yes, it is. So what I like to do with simple green is so this is going to depend. If you're using modern-ish models here, if you're using modern models, then even if they're made of white metal, they're not made of lead, they're made of gallium and tin. And that's fine. Gallium and tin is something that is not going to poison you. If you're working with models that were made in the 70s, the very old stuff, it is very possible that it's made of lead pewter. If you put that in simple green, you will dissolve lead into the simple green. So you get a solution of citric acid and lead. This, of course, is bad. And so you'll need to find some place to actually send that lead liquid mixture. And dealing with liquid waste in that form, so it's hazardous liquid waste, that's actually quite difficult to do legally and safely. So just be careful about that. But any of your models that you made, I shouldn't say any GW models that you're getting that are made in the 80s and up, they're going to be made of gallium. And so that's perfectly safe to use. Whenever you're done with this, I like to remove all of the large chips out of it And since simple green is citric acid, it's something you can flush down the toilet. It's if you read the back of the bottle, it'll tell you it's safe to do that. So you should be fine to do that even with some of the water-based paints that are in it. So the only exception here is if you're dissolving something that is toxic in it, you don't want to flush that. You do want to find a place that takes that kind of waste. The ultrasonic machine. Yes, it is. Yes, this ultrasonic machine. It is easy to dump. This whole inner liner does not come out, at least for mine. But if you pour from one of these back corners, then you won't end up getting liquid in here. Eventually, what I've found happens if you keep pulling stuff out of it from the front, from inside of it to the front, you'll actually get liquid inside of this, and then these buttons get a little bit more difficult to work. You can pop this open, but man, is it difficult to get back together. So what I would recommend doing is actually facing this away from you. So when you're working with this, pull from this side, have the back of it face you, and then press these buttons from reaching over the entire machine. This way you don't accidentally drop liquid in here. And if you do spill liquid on this, I would recommend cleaning it up very, very quickly. The acid that you're putting in here will actually eat the contacts that are on the chipboard that's directly behind this, and you will find that it becomes a little bit more difficult to press the buttons over time because you're actually etching all of those copper leads that are on the board. So just keep that in mind. You will want to not get liquid in this, but if you dump it by pouring this way, and I usually pour it through a sieve, that way I can toss all the paint chips and all the little bits. I can catch anytime I maybe would miss something in there. I would be able to, in fact, it looks like I didn't have it there, but here. Yeah, so I would reach over the machine. This is actually how I have mine set up. These buttons are away from me. I reach over it from the back, and then I'm able to pull things out without getting the liquid dripped onto this panel. When I'm done with it, there will be a slurry down here. I have a dedicated sieve that I use, and I pour the liquid through a sieve into another container. I take the container and I flush that down the toilet, and then I take all of my little paint chips and I throw them onto a pan, let them dry, and then I toss them into the trash. You could just dump it wet into the trash. I just don't do that because I don't want to make a mess if my trash bag leaks. But yeah, it's pretty easy to clean. It is all stainless steel in there. All right, any other questions? There's tons and tons of these things out there. The Harbor Freight one is just about the cheapest I've seen. This also goes for the airbrushes, which we're going to talk a lot about. This is an army that I've not really talked about airbrushing and done a lot of airbrushing on stream, but this army is going to be almost exclusively airbrushed to get that galactic effect that you saw in passing. So we're going to be talking quite a bit about how to use airbrushes, what kind of techniques work well for them, how to thin your paints for the airbrush, what chemicals to use, how to clean it, when to clean it. The answer's all the time. Which airbrush to use doesn't matter. I guess one other thing I can talk about in brief that I do have here, I'll send you back here to the Harbor Freight here. So they actually have these little kits. And this little kit right here, there it is. Yeah, so it's $100. It comes with this little terrible compressor, which is extremely loud but effective. And it comes with an airbrush. You can buy all of your kits and pieces here. Even the one, so if you are one of the locals in Midland, Michigan here, you can just get this stuff here. You can see there's several different versions of it, but these airbrushes are really good for applying things you don't want to put through your $300 airbrush. So maybe you have a Harder and Steinbeck brush and you don't want to actually run varnish through it. Maybe you don't want to run something that is a little bit more caustic than normal and pit the needle or damage something of that nature. Just use this one. These here are very, very cheap. So this is just the bottle here, but you can see all your accessories are available here. They are not good quality, but they are effective. They do work. I have used them to do modeling before, and oftentimes when I am going to do something with my models that I shouldn't be normally putting through an airbrush, like a varnish, I will just do that. And I've been pretty happy with the results here. In fact, it's really difficult to tell, in all honesty, the difference between the airbrushing I've done with a $300 airbrush and the airbrushing I've done with a $30 airbrush. I think that is partially speaking to my skill with an airbrush, which is low. So you will probably watch me improve even as I do this project. But these airbrushes here are definitely effective. They can be used. And I don't think the really low price tag should scare you away from it. I have found success with them. All right. Well, I thank you all for joining me today. We've had about an hour-long stream here. And the next stream is going to be Monday at 12. And that's when we're going to start painting. We're going to start working on airbrushing these, and you'll actually see kind of my setup here for working inside with an airbrush without poisoning myself and others. And so we'll talk more about that then, but I look forward to seeing you all here on Monday at 12 for our next stream, where we start painting this Aldari army in our new theme, which is that galactic theme.